what's going on? Thank you so much for watching today, and welcome back to another speed build in Planet Zoo. We're back in Sequora Zoo, so our kind of lower budget. I was previously calling it under budget, but I feel like we should describe it more as lower budget, with, you know, big grant funds here and there, because there's a couple builds that we've done in this zoo park that definitely cost probably a little bit more than what people would consider to be a low budget or under budget zoo. But anyway, I digress about that. It's a project that we've had going on for a while, so if you're not new to the channel, you will be familiar with it. And today we are adding the Alpine Ibex. So super excited about this one. The Alpine Ibex are of course one of the animals that we got with the newest DLC pack that announced or launched a couple months ago, a month ago. What is time even right now? My concept of time is totally been thrown off these last couple weeks or so. But anyway, you get the point. The newest DLC, the Europe pack, came out, and the Alpine Ibex was one of these animals. And I'm happy to get the Ibex in the pack. The difficulty with building for Alpine Ibex, especially if you're going to make content or videos on it, is that they pretty much live in dirt boxes with rocks, and that's pretty much it. So the problem with building for them is that I had to kind of sort of try to make it look a little bit more interesting for everyone, and I did that by kind of doing what I'm doing now, this little kind of fence here with the rock wall or the stone wall. So double fencing, keeping the guests away. I do end up moving this stone wall back a little bit a ways away from this fence that I'm creating right now, and doing a planter in between, something really commonly seen in zoos to keep the guests kind of from crawling over, sticking their hands in the enclosure. But other than that, this is pretty much just a upward sloped rocky cliff, because that's what the Alpine Ibex like, and that's pretty much it. The only thing that I'm realizing now as I sat down to record is I totally forgot to give them water. I wanted to give them a water trough rather than doing like more of a concrete pool, because I feel like that is really common to see with hoofstock type animals, is they have more of like a big water trough that gets drained and filled, and that's where they drink from, rather than having this kind of more expensive built-in kind of concreted pool that you would give more to an animal that maybe like to get in it and soak in it and things like that. And to my knowledge, the Alpine Ibex are not going to be one of those animals, in being that they do live up in rocky mountains and cliffs and things. There's not going to be a whole lot of like big pools of standing water that they're going to kind of wade in or try to swim in or anything like that. So I definitely did forget to just put down, it's just an item, and I wanted to put it down and kind of make it look pretty by putting some rocks around it, but I forgot. So I'm going to have to do that come whenever I get back into Sequora Zoo. So a little note for next time. But other than that, like I said, lots and lots and lots of rocks. If you guys thought I had made habitats before that included a lot of rocks, this one far and exceeds what I call a lot of rocks. The entire thing is rocks. So I hope you enjoy watching me place rocks, because for pretty much the remainder of the video, until probably the last like 2 minutes or so, this is what you get. You get me placing rocks all over the place. And of course, using my favorite rock, the aquatic rocks, because they're recolorable and they're perfect and I love them, but also mixing in some temperate rocks here and there just to give a bit of difference of color. Oh, and we take a break from our regularly scheduled rock placing program to place some trees, my second favorite thing to do in Planet Zoo. And I actually had a bit of a difficult time placing the trees for this habitat, not because I couldn't figure out what looked good, but more so I kept going back and forth between Sequora Zoo is a temperate zoo. I wanted to have temperate style trees because that matches what the rest of the zoo has throughout it, or do I want to be more taiga, more more alpine trees, because that's what the ibex would have like out in the wild, in the environment that it comes from. And I ended up sticking with kind of more temperate trees. In zoos, there's many different plants that animals can be okay with, just as long as they're obviously not toxic or anything like that to them. And I figured for cost sake, and also for just that little bit of realism that we like to keep in mind, this is probably going to be planted with the foliage that's going to be common around the area that this zoo is located in. So that's what I went with, you know, placing the normal kind of brambles. The common ash tree, I think it is one of my favorite trees. You can see there's a couple birch trees right there, and just kind of placing those here and there just to keep it cohesive with the rest of Sequora Zoo. And working on a little bit of a shade structure here, so I wanted to make sure that the ibex had somewhere to kind of get away from the elements, but again, keeping in mind that I don't think Sequora Zoo would have some big, massive, like stable or anything like that for them. I really ignored backstage stuff for this one, I'll have to say. So this is like the habitat equivalent of just making a front facade of a building. The exhibit looks great. It all looks great in theory. As a guest, you see it and you're like, wow, these guys have a wonderful habitat. And then when you go beyond, if you kind of peel back the page a little bit, there's really nothing else behind it. I just didn't feel like doing a backstage this time. So I definitely did leave room for it. And I did place this habitat next to where the bongos are. I talked about this in my franchise episode that came out yesterday, if you caught it, but keeping kind of similar like animals together. So things like hoofstock animals are gonna try to be grouped together in many different zoos because they have very similar care requirements, even though the bongos are obviously a tropical animal and the ibex are obviously an alpine taiga animal, but they have similar care requirements in that, you know, they're gonna eat things like hay and have the same kind of keepers that have knowledge on these hoofstock animals. So keeping that in mind is why I wanted to keep them close together, so that it kind of mimics what you would see in a real zoo. So to the right, that big open grass area is what I imagine expanding the building out to and making that kind of their back of house area, their little inside enclosure where the keepers could call them in if they really needed to, stuff like that. I just didn't feel like building it when I sat down to build this. So you can see I'm just kind of putting the habitat barrier there in the fence and calling it a day. Sometimes you need that. I was just kind of coming out of a funk building this one. For those of you that do follow the channel, you'll know I got very, very sick. Like a couple days after Christmas, I got some pretty bad pneumonia and basically knocked out of commission for 2 weeks or more and I say or more because I still have a pretty bad cough, still kind of getting over it, but now energy levels are back. My voice is back because that was a big problem. I lost my voice completely. And this was when all that was kind of happening. So I really didn't have a lot of energy. You know, my mind wasn't quite in it. I knew I wanted to build something because I actually missed playing on the computer. But I just didn't have, you know, the mental capacity to sit down and build something really detailed, which is why something like an Alpine Ibex habitat is perfect, and that I can just kind of mindlessly place rocks everywhere. It was great. Now moving on to a little bit of the guest area, I really wanted to try to keep this one cohesive because the last habitat that we added into Sequora Zoo was the American alligator habitat, and that one we are saying we did get a big grant for. It's a brand new building. It's probably one of the newer additions to this park. It really stands out from the rest of the habitats. And I did that a little bit on purpose, again, kind of following that little bit of a backstory. But this one I didn't want to be the case. So I went ahead and stole those shelter thingies from or pergolas, whatever they're called. I guess shelter thingies is not the correct term, but you know, you get it. The thing I'm working with right now. Moved those over to this habitat and then kind of just adjusted them a little bit to make it blend in a little bit better with this part of the zoo and the fence that I had already made. I felt like using the habitat circular round logs would look a little bit better. They've got a little bit more of a natural wood texture to them, and I felt like that kind of it looked better over here for this habitat. But keeping kind of the similar feel from the rest of the zoo, these were taken from our sun bear habitat all the way on the other side of the zoo. But anyway, while we kind of finish up this, there's not too much else to this video. It is a fairly simple, short, sweet video, but I do want to talk a little bit about our Alpine Ibex friends. I have some information pulled up here, but it's honestly really not that in-depth whatsoever. So we'll just talk about them for a very, very short amount of time. Like, for example, under their geographic range, all it says is that Alpine Ibex are found in Central Europe, South to North Ethiopia, and the East Coast to Central China. And that's basically it. That's all that it has. The next thing says here for habitats is Alpine Ibex are mountain animals, usually living at elevations up to 3,200 meters. Males stay up on the rock cliffs during the day, whereas females stay below in the rolling slopes and bushy areas. At night, they will all move down to the forest for the night to feed. And that's basically it. That's 2 sentences you get about their habitat. Moving on to their physical description, the thing that I find most annoying about the physical description that's on this site is it makes no mention of their horns. I don't like that. That's like one of the things. The first sentence says Alpine Ibex are sexually dimorphic. Very true. So being sexually dimorphic, meaning that males and females look physically different from one another, and you can pretty easily tell which one is which. The horns is a big part of that. And then that's one of my favorite fun facts, I guess, or a little bit of information, is the difference between horns and antlers. Antlers are going to be something you find on like deer, and they shed every single season, and then they grow new ones. But horns are fixed to the animal. They don't actually shed them. They're there their whole life. So there you go. One of my favorite fun facts. If you were curious or ever wondered. Now you don't have to. But anyway, that's kind of all it says about physical description, other than it just says, males are a little bit bigger and, all that kind of normal stuff that I don't, not super interesting. Their coats are uniformly brown to gray with thick beards. That's the last sentence of that. And that's pretty much it on the information, other than we'll talk a little bit about their behaviors, as females live in social hierarchies that consist of 10 to 20 females in a herd with one dominant female. Males live in smaller herds of about 6 to 8 until the fall, when the males rut. During this time, males become solitary and are aggressive to other males. Some males live solitary all year long. That's pretty much it. So that's the information here. I did forget to pull up these guys. I guess I could look it up real quick. Alpine Ibex, the IUCN red list, just to see what their classification is. Yeah, that's what I thought. Least concern, so they're stable in the wild, which is good. That is the last bit of information that I wanted to include there. So we are finishing up the habitat here. We're going to get to the very end. Let's see, where am I at? I've added now the little decoration out in the guest area, adding a little bit of a planter, and then again trying to keep it cohesive with the rest of the zoo. So bringing over these little signs here that I made for the peafowl habitat a long time ago. You can see that I started off by putting some billboards down, and my idea was to make custom billboards like I did for the American alligator habitat, but there's something about the charm of the signs that are made with the art shapes and the switches and the small little pieces. And not to say that the signs that I made a long time ago are all that detailed or anything like that, but I just feel like there's a little bit of extra charm with them. And so I wanted to bring those over just because I like how they look in comparison to something like a billboard, which is going to look very, very realistic and sometimes can kind of stand out from all the pieces in the game. And then last but not least, I felt like the habitat needed just a little bit more detail. So I went ahead and did the same thing that I did for the moose and pronghorn habitat ? In what is that zoo called? Pine Mountain Sanctuary? Can you tell I haven't built in it in a really long time because I've forgotten the name of it? But yeah, a little trick that I did there that I got from Beyond Drew TV, just taking the grasses, sinking them way into the ground and making them look like a little bit of overgrowth around the habitat. And then the very last thing, I believe the very last thing that I do is put these little fences inside the rocks, make them look like they would be something like hot wire or just some extra fencing to make make it so that the Alpine Ibex couldn't actually jump out of the habitat. I realized in placing some of the rocks around the outside to kind of join up the edges, it kind of looked like they were like a hop, skip, and a jump away from just kind of going and hanging out with the guests. So I wanted to make it look like that wasn't so possible for them, that there was actually some attempt to keep the zoo animals in their zoo enclosure, as all good zoos should. And with that, we are approaching now the cinematics. Look at that, such a short video. I talked the whole way through. So do enjoy a look at these little cinematics, watch them kind of walking around in their habitat. They are very cute animals, absolutely love them. Little bum they don't use their enrichment item a little bit more, because I did place that whole rock enrichment for them and they didn't use it. But anyway, if you guys did enjoy the video, do go ahead and leave a like down below. It really does help me out. I greatly do appreciate it. Hitting that subscribe button will make sure you don't miss out on anything coming to the channel in the near future. And until next time, I will talk at you guys soon. Bye!